Okay, so to get this into Maya, we can use one of two scripts. We can use the Create Maya scene node script from Creative Crash, which we're going to get into. But first off, I want to show you the sort of bare bones way of getting this out as an FBX, which not only can go into Maya, but also Softimage and Max. So this is just the old-fashioned way. There's a lot more setup inside your 3D package, though, than using such a script, easy script such as the Create Maya scene node. So I'm going to re-enable camera tracker a point cloud here. I'm going to go ahead and create a node called the write geo node. And it's going to write out anything attached into a scene node, as you can see here. So I'm going to go ahead and set this, as you can see here, to not OBJ because that's a mesh file, but FBX. And that's going to be able to export out animations as well, such as the camera. So we want to include geometries, such as the cubes, cameras, lights, axes, point clouds, which is this point cloud stuff here. And for the file extension itself, I'll go ahead and click on that, and I'm going to go ahead and put that under, in my case, live action scene Maya scenes, and I've run ahead and created one already here. I'm just putting Nuke export, and make sure you got .fbx down there because Nuke is fidgety about extensions, making sure they're there. And if you hit execute and you hit OK, our range is 0 to 219, you'll see it's going to bake out animations of the camera, bring out the geometries, and so forth. So at this point, we can now jump into our 3D package. And let's do that by jumping into Maya. All right, so now we're inside of Maya. I'm going to go ahead and take that FBX here and just drag it right in. And we'll give it a couple seconds to bring in all the goodies. And let's see what we got. All right. So what we have here is really cool. We have a series of locators that are, in this case, a little too big. So let's jump into our outliner and see what we have. We have our camera, which is super, super teeny tiny. We have a couple of mesh cubes in here. So I'll go ahead and just kind of walk down the path here. So here's our 3 cubes, and then we have all these locators. So I'm going to take all of these locators, and I'll just go ahead and jump in and grab them. So here's this one right here. Come all the way up to the top and grab all these locators, and why not, let's just go ahead and group them and just call them reference points, like so. And let's go ahead and take our cubes and group those, and let's call them cubes. Finally, let's take the camera, the reference points, and the cubes, and we'll group those together, and we'll just call this the scene node. Okay? So we have everything nicely organized. I'm going to go ahead in my reference points, grab every single one of these locators, and scale them down because they're just way too big. So I'll hit scale, and I'll just go ahead and bring these down to the point where I can see them a little bit better. There we go. So now we can start to see everything as is. A couple things that are sort of a pain in the rear end is we have to set up our frame range here. So let me go ahead and show you what that is. Here's our camera. If I extend out the scene itself here, let me go ahead and pull this out. And we'll go up to something like 500 frames or something and pull it out. You can see that the last frame here, if I go ahead and go to the last key, is frame 219. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this for frame 219. And we must never forget that we have a frame on frame 0 that we have to render out. So there is our range. There's our camera motion. Everything's looking very good. Okay. So just by taking a look at this, we can see there's the gazebo, and we can start to judge, is there something that we might need to adjust? Is there any rotational issues here? Maybe it looks like I maybe need a little bit of rotation in the x-axis a little bit more, because it looks like the gazebo is sort of like facing downward this way a little bit. So it's really sort of up and down, whatever. But in this case, we want to start to establish what our scale is in our scene. So let me go ahead and just kind of take a look through the camera here. There's our scene. Now, our image plane isn't set up in here, and this is one of the bad things about doing this, but it's okay. We can just go ahead and view select camera, and I'll go into my attribute editor, and I'm going to go into my environment, and I'm going to say create image plane. There we go. And that's going to give us a chance to put an image in here. which will be our plates and so forth. And I'm going to go ahead and say View, Camera Settings, Resolution Gate. And let's go ahead and jump into our Render Globals and make sure that we set up our resolution for what it is, which is 1920 by 1080, in this case HD 1080. So there we go. Now, the question is, what image plane do we stick in here? And that's a very important question because we tracked in the perfect undistorted footage, not the original plate. So if I just come in here and plug in our original plate, it's not going to match up because this solve was solved under the perfect undistorted plate. So we have to rewrite out a JPEG sequence to actually look at it inside here. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So we're going to pop back into Nuke. There we go. And I'm going to come back over here and let's go ahead and put a write node. So I'll go ahead and do a write node. And let's just plug it in over here just to be fancy schmancy. So there we go. So we're kind of moving down the pipeline. We got that undistorted node and we're going to write this out as a JPEG sequence. So here's my write node. I'm going to set this to JPEG. I'll leave quality and it doesn't really matter. I'm not worried about too much about quality. And for the file name itself, let me go ahead and just put this under D live action CG. And I'm going to go under footage. And actually, let's go under plate shots, shot 5. And I'm just going to keep everything nice and organized here. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a new folder right here. And I'll call it the undistorted plate. And just to be probably specific, let's say shot 5, so we know what it is. All right. Once again, let's go ahead and just put undistorted plate sh5 dot, and then we want to do number sign dot JPEG. Again, if you have more than 9,999 frames, you probably want to add another numeric sign in here. So this is just stuff that Nuke is very fidgety about, and everything looks good. Let's go ahead and hit render and frame 0 to 219 and we'll hit OK. So now we're just getting that undistorted plate kind of pushing through, and this is what we're going to use to plug in to our image plane. All right, so back in Maya, I'm going to hit View, Select Camera. And I'm going to go ahead and plug that in. So I'm going to come over here under the image plane itself, way at the back here, and let's go ahead and find out where that's at. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my D, live action. I got so much junk on here. And we'll go to plate shots, shot 5. There it is. And there it is. So I'll go ahead and hit open. And then you go ahead and turn on Use Image Sequence. Cool. Just to be safe, you do not want to make sure your auto key thing is on. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I lock, right click and lock selection. And click here, shift select here, right click and say lock selection so that I don't accidentally select and move around the keys of the actual camera. So very important that you view select camera and you take that and you lock all those options. All right, so you can even see the orientation inside of this program here is set up pretty nice. But let's say I wanted to tweak it a little bit. I can take my C node and I can actually start to rotate this a little bit. So I'll just go ahead and jump into rotate mode here. And I can very quickly kind of rotate this around and set up my orientation differently. And we're also going to scale up this node because we need to have this be physically accurate. Like I was saying earlier, we want to measure something out that's roughly 300 centimeters, which is the equivalent of 1 story. This, I'm assuming, since this is half of a story here, is 150 centimeters. As you know, inside of your preferences here, so if I go to Windows, Setting, Preferences, doesn't matter what program you're in, you'll find that most likely if you're Soft or Maya, your settings are already set up for centimeters. So that's what we'll probably just stick with. So I want to make sure that this is scaled up correctly.